What's up, everybody? Pastor Matt here. Thanks for checking into the YouTube channel. Hey, a couple of days ago, I did a short little cell phone video about what Bible publishers need to stop doing. And in that video, I looked at wide margin editions, particularly the inner gutter margin, where you can hardly even write any words, which sort of defeats the purpose of having a wide margin. Because the purpose of having a wide margin edition, of course, is so that you can take notes on the columns and the text, and you have all kinds of room to write. So what's the point of having a thin little inner gutter margin where you can't even do any note taking? Well, in this video, I want to continue that series of things that I really wish publishers would stop doing. Today, we're going to take a look at typography, which has to do with how the words and the fonts and the layouts and the footnotes and all these things are kind of laid out on the page. Now, we're going to be looking at a paragraphed edition here in this video. And I realized, look, there's a purpose for paragraphed editions and there's a purpose for verse by verse editions and so forth. But if you're going to do a paragraphed edition and you're going to have footnotes and you're going to have cross references, then you please, you have to stop doing this. So let's go ahead and have a look at this text right here. Now, the problem with this, I posted this on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, and hardly anybody could even see the problem, which only shows you how insidious the problem actually is. So check this out. So here we have chapter 18, and there's no verse 1 here. It's just a T, but we don't really need a verse 1 because we have the big chapter heading number 18 right here. But then supposing you're preaching from this text, let's say, and you're going to be preaching through verses of the Bible, which is what good preachers do. And so here's verse 2 right here, no problem. And here's verse 3, and here's verse 4, and verse 5, and verse 6, and here's verse 7. Okay, so what's the problem? Well, did you see it? The problem is that verse 7 isn't verse 7. Verse 7 is actually footnote number 7, and you can hardly even tell that because it certainly looks like this is verse 6 and that this is verse 7. But the problem here is that the footnote number indicators look so close to the actual verse numbers right here that you can hardly even tell the difference. So if you go on to verse 7 and you start preaching from "it would be better," you've kind of missed the plot, because verse 6 goes all the way down to the end of this page, and verse 7 is actually up on the top of the next column. So here you would be totally thrown off, especially if you're preaching live. Remember, you're already kind of nervous because you're in front of 200 people and you're trying to go on to your next point in your sermon, and all of a sudden your eye just gets confused here. So why in the world would we design a Bible where the footnote number indicators look almost exactly like the regular verse numbers? Now, in this case, it's actually kind of italicized, so it's a little bit different, but man, that is really close, right? So let's go ahead and have another look at another text where the same problem comes into the fore here. So we've got verse 7 here, verse 8 here, another verse 8. What? No, you can't have two verse 8s. And here's verse 9, and here's another 9. So what's going on here? Well, the same problem. It's really compounded when the footnote number happens to be in sequential order with the verse numbers. That's where it really gets confusing. If this was verse 99 or something, then you probably wouldn't get confused with footnote number 8. But quite a few times what happens is that you get this little mess up here where this footnote number 8 looks so close to this verse number 8 right here that it's really going to get thrown off. And this one's even worse because this actually begins a new sentence, whereas the previous one, at least it was in the middle of a sentence. But you can see where if you were preaching from this text, this could definitely be a problem for you. Even if you weren't preaching and you just came to a Bible study and somebody asked you to read verse 8, you might start right here. And your group looks at you and you're like, what's this guy thinking? Doesn't he know how to read? Well, no, it's not your problem. It's the layout and the design of this particular Bible. Let's go on to another example right here. One more example. This is another one where it's just entirely complicated. So we've got verse 3 right here. Here's another 3, a 4, another 4. Here's 5, another 5, and a 6 and a 7. So what is happening here? Well, were you able to keep up? We've got verse 3. We have footnote 3, and then look at this. We have footnote 4 and verse 4 right next to each other. You couldn't blame somebody if they thought that was a 44. I mean, obviously you can kind of tell when they're right next to each other. And here's verse 5, or is this verse 5? Well, better check twice. This is verse 5, this is footnote 5, and here's verse 6. So you can see where whoever was designing this particular Bible did not think about the actual utility of who would be using this Bible and how they would be using it. So if you're a preacher or a teacher or even trying to follow along, this is going to be a major problem for you. And this could be easily corrected with just a couple of design tweaks. The first and most obvious thing we could do is to make the actual verse numbers bold and slightly larger. That's going to differentiate these quite a bit. Look here at the 4 and the footnote 4. We can tell that one is slightly italicized, that they're two slightly different fonts, but man, are they close in size, right? Man, are they close in size? I mean, if you were to drop this one down just a little bit or lift this one just up, they're almost exactly the same size. So that's a problem. Why don't we go full bold with this 4 right here so it's definitely set apart from the footnotes? Now, there's something else that we could do, and this is a little bit more complicated, but let's have a look at one more different kind of Bible. Let me flip my screen here. This is a neat one. This is the New King James wide margin, verse by verse. I showed this Bible previously in the other clip on what Bible publishers should stop doing. But now this is a verse by verse. So obviously this is going to be easier for us to find the verses. In fact, it's so easy a caveman could do it because verse by verse Bibles are designed for verse by verse preaching and teaching. So you might want to consider what kind of a Bible you're going to get. However, notice what they did here with the cross references and the footnotes, which make it all the much more easier to find them when you need them. So let's have a look here at verse 16. Here we have a cross reference. This is A, so we went to an alphabetical system rather than a numerical system. And with the footnotes, it's back to numerical. But notice here the key difference. First of all, both cross-reference and the footnote numbers are in red, so I'm not going to confuse them, even if this were a paragraphed edition. And then secondly, both the size and the style are markedly different from the verse number. So you can easily tell, even if they were right next to each other, that this is a footnote and that this is a verse number. That's exactly what Bible publishers should do. Make those verse numbers bigger, make them bold, make them more obvious, change the color if you have to. But please, Bible publishers, stop making Bibles in which the verse numbers look so much like the footnotes or the cross-reference indicators that the reader or the preacher is confused. All right, well, thanks for checking into this video. Do love you lots, and we will talk to you later.